And hit record. There we go. So just to bring you quickly up to speed, we were introduced in chapter 1 to a woman named Naomi, a man named Elimelech, and their 2 sons. We are told that they leave the city of Bethlehem, because of a terrible famine that has gripped the area. And they leave not in search of food. They leave their area because they are looking to protect their wealth. Rashi tells us that they leave because they didn't want to share their wealth by giving the necessary support to their tribal members. So they figured, you know what, if you run out of town, no one's going to come knocking on your door asking for a handout. So they pick up and they run away. Where do they go? They go to Moab. And it is there that they settle. It is there that their 2 sons, Machlon and Chilion, that is where that they find wives. And everything seems to be going fine, except bad things start happening. Number 1, Elimelech, the father, dies. And then the 2 sons die, leaving effectively Naomi and her 2 daughter-in-laws, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. It leaves her with these 2 women who have no children with the sons. So presumably they weren't married very long. And it leaves her in a very difficult position because given her circumstances, what were some of the problems that she was facing? One, without a man or men to provide for the home, she could not rely on the Moabites to provide any kind of sustenance for her because, as we mentioned last week, they are not her tribe's people. And so the absence of tribal members, of tribal affiliation, of knowing that you could count on your fellow tribesmen to be of support to you, was a harsh reckoning for Naomi to realize that if she was going to survive, it would not be in Moab. She would have to go back to the Shevet Yehuda, to the tribe of Judah, in particular to Bethlehem, where then she could apply for tribal social assistance, which is this social network that tribes provided to each other because they were family. And that's what families do and did. Not so much today. People are expected to be self-sustaining, but in a tribal network, it's very, very different. I just have one thing here. Sandy, you have a question? Sandy?
I think she's muted, Rabbi.
Hold on a minute. Shouldn't be. Sandy, do you have a question?
I do.
Okay, so
it's
please
about
ask.
Orpah. May I ask a question about Orpah?
Yes, please.
Are Ruth and Orpah related other than being married to brothers?
We have no knowledge or indication that they knew each other before.
Okay, and the other question I had, this came up in another discussion, so it may be just a folk tale. Is Orpah, is Goliath descended from Orpah?
That I don't know either. It wouldn't make sense because Orpah is a Moabite, and Goliath is a Philistine.
Oh, so probably not. Okay.
Probably not. Probably not.
All right. Do we know what happens to Orpah after she goes back to her people? She
goes back to her family's house and she lives her life.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. And do this. Okay. So where we find ourselves in this is is now the moment where Orpah goes back to her family, and she does so because Naomi looks at what she has and she says to the 2 girls, I have nothing to give you. I have no sons to give you. I have no money. If you want to make a fresh life for yourself, and you should, go back to your families, go back to your tribes, get new husbands, and build your life. Orpah, emotionally, however. But she does listen to Naomi. She goes. However, now we discover with Ruth, there is a different answer coming from her. And so let's take a look at that. I'm going to share the screen with you all. And here we are. And this image, which I shared with you earlier, is that capturing of the image. The woman on the right is obviously Orpah, who's going back. The woman standing is Naomi. She clearly looks older and quite bereaved. And the woman clinging to her, well, we're going to discover who that is, but you know the answer already. So let's just, okay. And we should be right here. Okay. So in verse 16, so Ruth says to her, "Al tifki'i bi la'azvech." Do not force me to leave you. Lashuv me'acharayach. In other words, to not follow you. And then she says, "Ki el asher telchi elech," because where you go, I will go. Uva asher talini alin, and where you will sleep, I shall sleep. Amech ami, your people shall be my people. Ve'elohayach Elohai, and your God shall be my God. Okay, so this is a powerful, powerful moment in Ruth's life, and it's certainly one of the great missives to be found in biblical literature. People quote it frequently, wherever you go, I'll go, as an act of or a statement of devotion and love. The Rashi on this is quite telling. And I want us to take a look at that, and I'm going to make it larger so everyone can take a look at it, if it will permit me. Here we go. And excellent. Okay. So here is the Rashi. Rashi says as follows, and it quotes from the Midrash, from the ancient rabbis. And in the Midrash, we are told, I apologize. In the Midrash, we are told that Rashi breaks down each part of her statement. So it reads as follows, that from here, the ancient rabbis learned that that someone who wants to convert, that there are certain things that they need to be told. And I'm just going to stop the screen share here for a moment. As I said to you last week, the story of Ruth is seen as a story of conversion. Interestingly enough, until this time, there really is no idea of conversion. There's no concept of conversion to be found in biblical literature, certainly not in the 5 books of Moses. The story of Ruth is one of the earliest stories we have of this idea that a people who are not born into a tribe can become adopted and part of the tribe. And this is a telling moment if you were to map yourselves out in this evolutionary timeline of Judaism. This is one of the early steps where Judaism emerges or starts to emerge from being a strictly national-based, ethno-religious-based, tribal faith into something that is developing a universal message. In other words, it's emerging out of the story from being a genetic-based movement into a faith-based movement. Now, to be completely transparent and honest, there is another story that predates the book of Ruth that the ancient rabbis talk about being a mass conversion. And it is in the book of Exodus, when the Israelites leave, we are told that there was a mass of non-Israelite people who came with them. The the jail doors opened and everyone ran out. And a bunch of them decided to hitch their wagons to the Israelite train, figuring, it was probably a safe way of going. But one of the distinctions I want to make is this. Number one, the biblical text, we read nothing of this Erev Rav, of this mixed multitude, as it's called in the book of Exodus, of them undergoing any kind of conversion. Number two, you'll note that there was no Judaism and there were no Jews before the giving of the Torah. Now, these people were non-Israelite, but there really was effectively no religion. And so in this regard, what we're discovering is that perhaps this mixed multitude who left out of Egypt with the Israelites, that their standing at Mount Sinai was kind of like a conversion for all the other Israelites too, maybe. So putting that aside, because I don't think this is an apples and apples kind of thing, I actually think that this is the first real tale of conversion that later on is going to be augmented in the fifth chapter of Sefer Nehemiah, in the book of Nehemiah, after the destruction of the first temple, and about 70 years later, a bunch of Israelites return back from Babylon, and they come with non-Jewish spouses, and Nehemiah, Ezekiel, Ezra, all these people, these great leaders, are facing a circumstance where something has to be done with these non-Jewish spouses. So that comes later. So this, I think, is the first story. And so the ancient rabbis are going to look at this next few verses, and they're going to tease out ideas as to how a conversion process would functionally operate on a standardized basis, which is to say that the ancient rabbis were looking for a way of creating a standardized legal way of admitting people into the faith. And the story of Ruth is the earliest, and in some ways it is the clearest story as to how a process might look like. And so they're going to look at this story very carefully, and they're going to tease out meanings on it in order to derive a process. Why would the ancient rabbis be so concerned about a conversion process? A few reasons. One, I think that they didn't create a conversion process. I think already from the time of Ezra, the story that I told you before, I think it started. But also, in the time of the ancient rabbis, during the time of the Greeks and the Romans, there were many, many non-Jews who converted to Judaism. They were deeply, deeply attracted to the philosophy and the rituals of Judaism. And they needed to have some kind of process to admit them in. So there's a lot of current forces that were working to create that. And so they go to this story. Okay, so without further ado, that little bit of preamble, we're now going to go back into that Rashi and we're going to take a look at it. Actually, before I do that, my friends, just very quickly, does anybody have a question? Don.
All the people who were at the Mount Sinai. How did they, ones that were not Jewish or Hebrew, how were they put into the different tribes?
Right, so that's an excellent question. Those who are non-Israelites, what tribe did they go into? I don't know. I don't know. Presumably, if they were women, they obviously must have married in with some of the Israelite men, so they would have been taken into their tribe. As for the men, I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question, though. Okay. And here we go. Here we go. So that statement of Ruth's, wherever you go, I will go. So the ancient rabbis say that first and foremost, a prospective convert is told of some of the punishments for violating Jewish law, so that if they decide, in fact, that they want to renege and not become a convert, they'll know, in fact, or have a substantial reason as to why they wouldn't. This is one of the foundational ideas of conversion, at least from an ancient perspective, that the convert would be told, Talmudically they say, the convert should be told some of the big and small mitzvot. The convert should also be informed of the punishments for transgressions, for transgressing these commandments. And Rashi now is going to take us on a tour of a famous rabbinic lesson. And here's how it goes. For example, when Ruth says, if you look at my pointer, wherever you go, I will go. The ancient rabbis say that that Ruth was answering about the law prohibiting travel on Shabbat. So she was basically saying, when Naomi said to her, you know what, we're not allowed to travel on Shabbat, Ruth turns around and says, wherever you go, I will go. In other words, she says, if you don't go somewhere on Shabbat, I won't go. So she was accepting it. And then Naomi says to her, we are prohibited to allow a female to be secluded in private with a male who is not her husband. And then Ruth says, La'an telin elin, wherever you sleep, I'll sleep, meaning I'll sleep with women. You know, I won't sleep with strange men. I'll just be amongst my sisters. And then the third point is, Naomi says to Ruth, our people is separated from all the other people because of the mitzvot, the 613 mitzvot in the Torah. And then Ruth replies, et amech ami, that your people is my people. And then Naomi says, you know, idolatry is forbidden. And then she says, your God is my God. And then she says, you know, there are all these death penalties by the Beit Din, by the Jewish court. And then she says, wherever you die, I will die. And so she says, accepting all of these ideas, wherever you'll be buried, I'll be buried. And so the ancient rabbis seized upon this very, very short discourse by Ruth as being her answer to the questions that Naomi is putting at her as a challenge to her sincerity if she really wants to convert. Okay, so that's the rabbinic view of this dialogue that Ruth is giving to Naomi. So I want to share with you probably the real intent in the moment of what it meant at the time that it was being spoken. Let's go back to the text. So in the real, I'm just going to reduce the size of this, my friends, a bit. Okay, here we go. So when Naomi says to her, wherever you go, I'll go, and wherever you sleep, I'll sleep, and your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die. These are statements of tribal affiliation, that Ruth was saying to her that I want to be part of your people and that I will support them and be a part of them as if they are mine. All the places that you go, the gods that you worship, these are the things that I, in fact, will do for myself. So this is, Ruth, I think, is also offering a statement of tribal commitment, for lack of a better word, tribal commitment. So now let's go to verse 17. She says, wherever you die, I will die, and it was there that I will be buried, meaning that I want to be buried amongst my new people. Don't send me back to Moab. And that was an important distinction because in the ancient world, people believed that being buried was a portal to a rebirth and it would come back to her people. So she said, you know, she wants to be buried amongst her new people. And then she says as follows, V'cho Yosif, ki hamavet yafrid beni uvenayach. Let nothing but death separate you from me. And it is a beautiful, beautiful, loving statement of commitment and devotion that is still spoken by people who love each other, be it romantically or familially, that nothing but death should separate us. And it is a beautiful, beautifully worded expression. Let's go to verse 18. Vater'eh ki mit'ametzet hi lelechet, and Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her. V'techdal l'deber eleha, and therefore at this point, Naomi stopped speaking to her. And what does this mean? What this means is there's a long-standing rabbinic tradition that I no longer observe, by the way, and that is when prospective converts come to your office, you're supposed to attempt 3 times at pushing them away. In other words, dissuading them from converting. This is rooted in lots of different things, but one of the things it's rooted in is this little story where Naomi, according to the ancient rabbis, where she tries very hard to make an argument against against Ruth converting. Now, she makes the same argument with Orpah a little bit earlier, but she doesn't have to go into much depth. A few little things she says to Orpah, and Orpah is running back home. Ruth is more determined. And so Naomi undertakes a more detailed argument against Ruth converting, but Ruth persists anyway. And so once she persists, even after everything she's told, Naomi stops talking. In other words, this is what she wants. This is what she's going to have. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, so they now they leave Moab and they come back to Beit Lechem. And as they come into the city of Beit Lechem, Vateichom kol ha'ir aleihem, and the entire city was bewildered, was just in a shock. Why? V'tomarna hazot Naomi. They said, "Is this Naomi?" Okay, and why are they asking, "Is this Naomi?" Because in verse 20, Naomi answers them by saying, "Al tikra'ena li Naomi, don't call me Naomi, kar'ena li mar'ah, call me Mar'ah." Why Mar'ah? Ki heimar shadai li mi'od, because God has dealt me very bitterly. Why would she say that? Well, after losing her 2 sons and her husband, she feels the weight of her loss. And clearly, upon returning back to Beit Lechem, to Bethlehem, she looked a very different woman too. She didn't look like the same person who left. The same person who left the town with wealth, a husband, and children, and she returns now a widow, childless, and broke, and she looks completely the part, to the point where people cannot believe what they're seeing. Verse 21, she goes on to say, Naomi does, Ani mele'ah halachti v'rekam hashiveni. I left, she says, full, and God brought me back empty. Lama tikra'ana li Naomi? Why would you call me Naomi? Va'adonai anabi, because God has dealt with me harshly. And v'shadai heirali, and has done evil or bad to me. Not evil, but bad. So God has answered her situation, so to speak, when she left. Let's turn to verse 22. So on verse 22, Vatashav Naomi v'Ruth Moaviyah kalata, and Naomi and Ruth, the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, have returned back with them. Hashavam Mishdei Moav, they returned back from the fields of Moab. Vehema ba'u Beit Lechem. They came to Beit Lechem. B'tchilat Katsir So'orim. At the very beginning of the barley harvest. Okay, let's just stop the share here. This detail is important. Why do you think the timing of the barley harvest would be critical to this story? So I'm going to unmute you. I'm just curious to hear some of your answers. Do you think that there's something special or particular as to why they mentioned that the barley is being harvested?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Maybe because so it would be a festive season and people would be happy, you would think. There's a commitment to give, to help others. Maybe there was employment opportunities because jobs were needed to harvest. That's all I can think of.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone? Just speak up if you have.
Sharon seems muted.
Sharon is muted?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Linda's talking, but no one's hearing her.
Okay. Well, if someone wants to say something, say something. So, David, I think you're spot on. I think that, first of all, this period of the barley harvest is the period that we are in. It's the period of the Omer. Okay? That's the first thing. Host has me muted. Unmute all. Everyone is unmuted, Margaret. So, okay. So, that's the first thing. So that's one of the timings as to why we read it during Shavuot to begin with.
Yeah.
But David, you're right. Number one, it would be an employment opportunity. But the other thing is that people would be required. There are two agricultural laws that we're going to discover that are biblical in nature from the Torah itself that's heavily impacting the story. And they are as follows. They are pe'ah and leket. Leket is when people are harvesting and drawing together the bundles of sheaves. If anything should fall out as they're tying the bundles together, collecting them, they're not allowed to pick them up. They have to leave it on the ground for the poor people to come. The other thing is that the corners of the fields called pe'ah, from the word peot, right? The corners of the head, the payas, the pe'ah, the corners of the field also have to be left unharvested. The poor people would come and take that. So her timing of going at this particular moment was well-timed. She knew that when she would arrive in Beit Lechem, in Bethlehem, that there would be food available.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else?
Rabbi, are you sure? I think there's a whole bunch of people who seem to be muted, and they. Are you sure you unmuted everyone?
Everybody.
I don't know.
I have no control over that.
Okay, so people like Linda, maybe people are self-muted?
I know, I just left and came back in.
Hey, Margaret, you had a question for me?
The system.
Actually, no, I was, well, there was a part about the conversion I thought was also social, right? Which is that women always had to sort of follow men. So the choice of converting was less for them, like in a sense, but men would have had more opportunity for advancement in their own tribe than another tribe, which would also, I thought, maybe keep them less from wanting to convert as well at that time. So this is, I think, pretty radical.
The question of men versus women as converts, I mean, in ancient...
Just at the time, given that, like, the way it worked. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure there would have been a dramatic difference in terms of opportunities for men or women.
Really?
I don't think there would be. They would all be newly inducted, so to speak. They wouldn't have tribal history in that respect. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to pick up Monday is our next scheduled date, Monday. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. The story is going to move quickly and intensely as Naomi's return back to Bethlehem brings her on a fascinating, gentle collision with the forces of history and nature. So stay tuned. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and stay clean and safe.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.